So I've known Lauren for a very, very long time. That was in 2 or 3 previous lives ago when I always remember Lauren as the superstar of marketing and strategy when we were in pharmaceuticals. And I bumped into her recently and realized that she's been doing Blue Ocean like since the very beginning when the book was actually written. And she's now a professor at INSEAD. She helps companies think about Blue Ocean, how to differentiate value, and so on. So I'm really, really excited. Lauren works both in French and in English, so she's going to stay with us tonight for the dinner and the apéro. So after the meeting, she is going to be here to answer your questions and help you think through some of your strategic work. So a hand of welcome for Lauren.
All right, thank you, Kim, for that. Very excited to be here. It was great to bump into Kim, and so she was starting to tell me about this event, and I thought, wow, that's such a coincidence because quite recently there's been some talk about a particular case of an entrepreneur who's also a veterinarian. So I feel like he could have been in this room, a few years ago. And Kim said, maybe you could come and tell your story. So I want to tell the story about this vet, but I'm not telling you the story because I think it's the answer, because it's, this is what everybody should do. Innovation, as you know, has so many different answers. There's no one right answer. So I'm not telling the story because you're experts in your field. I'm not an expert in pet care. I'm not an expert at all in pet tech. And this is a distinctively low-tech offering that I'm going to actually talk about. And so therefore, you are going to be able to find all sorts of reasons why it doesn't work in your country, or you're going to recognize elements of it and say, I tried something similar, or somebody else tried something similar like that, and it didn't work. And, no doubt you're going to find things like that, as you should. This is your industry, you know it, and I accept that fully. I'm telling you this story because I'm trying to expose a different way of thinking about how to grow, which is what is at the core of Blue Ocean thinking. So I'm telling you this story because this gentleman was stuck, didn't know how to grow anymore. And he turned to Blue Ocean thinking and was very systematic about applying it. And he applied it using these tools and frameworks. I'm going to give you a little sampling of them today. Anybody in this room can do this. Anybody in this room can use these tools and frameworks in order to think differently about how to grow. So the good news is, you don't need a stroke of luck. And you don't need Steve Jobs to be on your board or whatever that incarnation might be. You don't have to be a born innovator. We all know people like that. It comes more easily to some people, but you don't have to have that in order to succeed. You have these frameworks and these tools that you can use. Now, the bad news is tools and frameworks are not enough because the mindset and the open, curious mindset and the willingness to try, I like to call it willingness to try, because you have to be willing to challenge the norms, challenge the way that things are done. And these frameworks and tools will actually help you do that. So that's why I'm telling you this story. Try to think beyond the little details of what I'm telling you. Try to think, how could I apply this in my context, in my world? How might that help me just think and analyze things a little bit differently? So that's why I'm telling you this story. Meet Dr. Sam Meisler. I don't know if anybody knows him. Does anybody happen to know him? He's in the United States. He's a vet. He was born in Washington, D.C., but he grew up in East Africa, watching wildlife. His father was a foreign correspondent for the Los Angeles Times. And so he grew up watching wildlife. He went back to the United States to go to university. He went to Harvey Mudd. If anybody knows that, it's an engineering type school, well known for that anyway, in California. But something was missing for him, he decided to go and become a vet. He missed the animal kingdom. So he went and he became a vet, and then he started as a horse doctor working in, I think it was Indiana. So he started in the state of Indiana as a horse doctor. He ends up moving to Florida. He's a horse doctor there too. He meets his wife, he gets married. Then he starts working with dogs, with cats, with birds, in the night clinic, with the Society for Protection of the Cruelty Against Animals, doing neutering, basically anything to try to earn a living. Because it's hard to earn a living as a vet. It actually is hard to earn a living as a vet. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. So there he is doing this, and he's thinking, I'm having such a hard time. I've invested now in a little clinic. I'm not doing very well. He goes, he gets his MBA. He thinks, I need a business background. Vet school didn't give me that. So he goes, he gets his MBA. He's still stuck. He's not able to make ends meet. And during his MBA, he happened to read the book Blue Ocean Strategy. So he thought, okay, just gonna give this a try. And I'm gonna be diligent about it. So he knew that the place to start is trying to understand today what your offering might look like if you were gonna draw it out. So the first thing you gotta do is think, if I had to describe my offering, in this case it's a vet clinic, with 10 to 12 things, so 10 to 12 things that together as a package describe what my customers get from me. Customers being pet owners. And then, with your hand on your heart, he tries to look and say, how well do I actually provide that? So he's making his list, and he comes up, this is his chart of what he comes up with, what we would call a value curve. This is what's called a strategy canvas in the world of Blue Ocean. I know there are a few Blue Ocean people out there because I was talking to some of you during the breaks. So this is an example of a value curve on a strategy canvas, and this is what he comes up with. This is his chart, his starting point. He says, in terms of price, I'm about where everybody would expect me to be, at a 3. Now, where do I put a lot of effort? He says, you know what? Euthanasia comes up all the time. People come to me, I need to be sure I know the euthanasia. We do a lot of dental. We do, sounds weird, but a lot of time is actually spent dealing with taking appointments, people racing in, needing last minute changes. He needs a receptionist just to be able to try to deal with the telephones. People calling up with urgent questions about their animal. So telephone support was a big one for him. Surgery, radiology, anesthesia, boarding, hospitalizations. These are all things that are taking up a lot of time in the clinic. Is he spending a lot of time on just the minor illnesses and maybe the more chronic care? Well, what you might expect, where he recognizes he's not spending much time, is the preventative care, which he has a personal interest in, by the way. And he has to also recognize that he doesn't have very convenient hours either for him or for the pet owners. Location, same thing. And he also has to admit people are waiting an awful long time when they come to see him. So he does this value curve, and this is for him, and then he starts doing the value curves of his nearby competitors, so other vet clinics around him. And guess what? They all look the same. Everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody, if you had multiple value curves on here and they're all looking the same, what that picture is telling you is indeed there is no differentiation. You can't see any difference there. It means there's no differentiation. So this is where he is. He thinks, great. I'm here, all my competitors are here, and this basically is the value curve of the vet clinic industry. That's his conclusion. Now, once he has this, let's call it the starting point for change. Now he's accepting if he wants to be differentiated, he's going to have to do something different. Different versus what? Different versus what happens today. So you accept that you're going to change something, and that it's going to be different from what you're doing today. And you just defined what you do today. So let's hear now from him. I have a little clip of him talking about being a vet. And his next step is to try to understand what it is he might change. So, tested this out. Let's hope it works again. Here we have Dr. Sam talking about being a vet.
Veterinarians today, they come out of vet school with an enormous amount of student debt. And when they graduate, they're altruistic, they want to help animals, that's why they went into it. However, the reality on the ground when they're going to their first job is it's highly stressful. They have to make a lot of decisions, tens and tens of decisions a day, some of them life-threatening. They have to know multiple specialties. They need to know how to do surgery, dentistry, radiology, besides just preventive care and regular everyday stuff. And as a result, it's very stressful. They're also confronted with the possibility of doing euthanasia literally every week. When I practiced, we did euthanasia. It would come up every few days. And if you can handle it well, it's easy to do. It's actually a wonderful thing to do. However, it can be very draining if you don't have good mechanisms to handle doing euthanasia. Surgery is something that requires a certain skill set. It's also very stressful. You are caring for a pet that's under anesthesia, and depending on how your skills are, the pet will do well or not do well. And that's enormous stress for a veterinarian. The other pressure on veterinarians, it is a fee-for-service industry. So insurance is not a big player in the veterinary market. And when a pet comes in, there is a little bit of pressure as these young veterinarians are working for more clinics owned by private equity groups. The bottom line becomes very important. And they get a lot of pressure on upselling. And I'd like to think that most veterinarians would not succumb to that pressure, but it's a pressure nonetheless. And so they have pressure from corporate telling them to upsell and increase their average transaction. That's a big number let's play around in the veterinary world. And these vets, they feel that pressure. I would say one of the things in our profession, unfortunately, is burnout. And why is that happening? And there are lots of different theories about burnout. Some of it's decision load, workload. Some of it is the long hours. A lot of veterinarians are expected to work 10 to 12-hour shifts, and those shifts can eke out into longer shifts depending on what comes in at the end.
All right. So what we hear, in fact, Dr. Sam talking about is what we would call pain points. What he's basically doing is he's trying to understand what are the things that go wrong, what are the things that need to be fixed, and he's taking from his own experience, but he's also taking from other vets that he knows, and he's realizing all of these things are what we would call pain points. So, you need to be the jack of all trades. You need to be able to do it all. Your vet clinic needs to be the one-stop shop. Long, unpredictable hours. People come in at the last minute with their pet, and you're not just going to leave them there. Vets really want to be able to heal those animals, so they stay there. And all the other things that he was mentioning in the video here that I'm repeating are pain points for the vets. And there are even more than those. But pain points don't only exist for the vets, they also exist for the pet owners. So he's going out and he's also trying to understand what is it that is a problem for the pet owners. The pet owners are complaining about calling up and trying to get an appointment and not being able to get one. They're talking about the locations not being convenient. They're talking about these long waiting times and the fact that you bring your pet in and you can end up staying there for hours and you see all these pets going in and out of the back of the vet clinic. And so the vet is having to deal with all of these different pets at once, and you don't know what's going on with your pet. Very frustrating for a lot of the people. The costs that he mentioned is also an issue in the US. The number of people who have insurance is extremely low. I was talking to some today who said it's quite a bit higher, for example, in the UK, although it's still not that high. But there's very little insurance, very opaque pricing as well. Big bills that show up at the end of the visit, that really surprise people, and more. So he's got his starting point, which was our strategy canvas with the value curve there. That's what he wants to change. Now he understands what he's trying to fix, so what the pain points are, and now he needs to try and figure out what to do to change them. So let's hear what he has to say about that.
Loved back in business school some years before reading the book Blue Ocean Strategy. For me, the strategy canvas was key. Looking at different factors and what the traditional industry was, what different ideas came about, and I thought the veterinary industry was really ripe for change. And it was actually sitting, reading the paper in the morning, reading the New York Times. My wife had read an article on human walk-in clinics and the history, and she said, "Why don't you do that for pets?" And it kind of everything came together, thinking of the Blue Ocean Strategy canvas, and then my wife just saying, "Why don't you do that?" And it was sort of an aha moment. Went back to pen and paper, looked at all the different factors, which ones we're going to eliminate, which ones we're going to reduce, and went from there. At that moment in time, we were struggling financially as a family, so I had my 2 traditional practices and highly leveraged. So we started with even more factors eliminated just to get it off the ground. And do it one day a week in the afternoons on Saturday when I wasn't working at my other clinics. So I'm obviously was going to be the main veterinarian, and that would be free labor. So bootstrap mode, had the family in there. My 11-year-old daughter at the time, she's helping paint. My wife's painting, helping with the marketing. My stepson's helping with the marketing, and we literally built this with our own hands.
All right, so we hear from him about what he's going to try to change. And he mentions this story about sitting there at the breakfast table and talking to his wife and reading an article in the newspaper about human walk-in clinics, and all of a sudden the idea goes off. What we would call that, in fact, what's happening here is something we would call path 1 thinking. Path 1 thinking is when you're trying to find a solution and you're trying to figure out, what do I need to change about what I do in order to increase value? And you look anywhere but your own industry. You don't look within your own industry to try to find creativity and new ideas. If you look within your own industry, you'll find a competitor who does something neat, and you say, "Oh, I can do that too," and then you start doing it. So you let your competitors start to define what you're going to do. Here you look outside of it. So an alternative industry. Famous examples of that, Cirque du Soleil is a great example of that. When they're trying to redefine the circus, they're looking to the theater, they're looking to ballet in order to try to get ideas. The Southwest Airlines, back when there was deregulation in the United States, they weren't looking at other airlines to try to figure out how to design their new airline. They were looking at people who would otherwise take the bus. So you look at places that you think will help you think differently, and you see if you can borrow something. Can you borrow something from that alternative industry and put it in your industry for the first time in a way that it'll remove a pain point? And that's just one of the paths. There are 6 of them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Strategic groups is when we do go within our own industry, we try to find other competitors that are doing things in a different way. Like, let's say you're in the automobile industry and you are looking at, you're in combustion engines, you want to try and understand electronic vehicles, EVs, and you're trying to understand what it is that makes people trade up or down between those two things. So you can do that. You can do what we call the chain of buyers. That's when, for example, if you're in B2B, you take a look at the B2C target. You try to understand what their pain points are, because if you can solve the pain point of a customer of your customer, then maybe you can also solve your customer's pain point. You know, different examples of that. Complementary products and services. This is, for example, IKEA, who sells, furniture, as we know, but every single IKEA has restaurants and a playroom. Why? Because the kids get bored and the kids get hungry. You're solving parents' pain points by putting that there, and you're keeping them in the store longer. Number 5 is functional emotional. This is when you have an industry that's either very functional or very emotional. Let's take pharmaceuticals, for example, very data-driven, clinically driven, and you inject some emotion into that very functional industry. So like what Pfizer did with Viagra. Viagra came in and made the whole question emotional, right? It's no longer a functional issue, it's an emotional issue. So you can do this in your own ideation as well. And then time trends. We've had a number of examples just in the pitches we were looking at. A lot of times and trends that can point us in the right direction of where things are going. Like we were seeing, so many people now have pets after COVID. A lot of people are spending more money on pets. These are times and trends that if you project yourself in the future, try to understand what that new reality might look like, then you might be able to figure out what you're going to change about what you do today. And when we talk about change, we're talking about things we're going to stop doing, things we're going to eliminate, things we're going to do less of, things we're going to do more of because they are providing value, and things we're going to start doing for the first time in that industry. It's these 4 actions that we have to do all at once. We have to do all 4 of them. And if we do that, and this is what Sam did, Dr. Sam, I'm going to show you what he came up with, you can see very clearly, just by looking at that, without even looking at the details, you can see how differentiated it is. Right? It's extremely different to what was happening in the vet clinic industry until that time. He basically says, I'm going to lower the price a little bit. I think I can maybe get a few more people to come in with their pets. If I lower the price a bit, it can be expensive. Look at all these things he's no longer going to do. Tons of things he's no longer going to do. Euthanasia? Not doing it. If somebody comes in and their pet needs to be euthanized, he will forward them on. He will make sure they get to someone who can do that. No more dental. Look at this one. No more phones. You can't make an appointment. You have to walk in. No phones. No receptionist anymore. No more surgery, radiology, anesthesia. No more boarding and hospitalization. So he's really stripping it down to what he thinks the basics are. What is he going to spend time doing? Well, he's going to help with the more minor illnesses and chronic care needs. He's going to focus more on preventative care that he thinks is something that needs to be started more in the industry. He's going to focus on having more clinics with more convenient hours and locations. He's going to try and shorten that waiting time because there aren't going to be all these complications that walk in the door anymore that are going to take up all the time of the vet. So he's going to significantly raise the number of short waiting times that he has. And then he's going to make sure that there are no more simultaneously treatments of so many animals at once. So it's going to be one pet at a time. Everything is transparent. You walk in the clinic, you see everything that's going on. Your dog or cat is not taken somewhere where you can't see them. Everyone sees what's going on. There's no surprise billing. Very simple model. 3 packages, $99, $109, $199, depending on which package you want for your dog or cat. Very simple. And you're not going to find yourself in a situation where the vet might be essentially trying to upsell you on something or making a recommendation of something that you're not very sure of, and you're thinking, are they making this recommendation to me because they want to be able to do this service, Or does my pet really need this? So you don't have that doubt in your mind that he was hearing existed from pet owners. So he's not going to be experiencing that. People are not going to be experiencing that in his clinics because when there is a need for something to be referred on, he will make the referral himself. He's not trying to get the business for himself. He will make the referral only if it's really necessary. So look at how diverse that is. And he has this nice slogan that's on his website as well, Walk-in Pet Fair, open to you, kind to your pets. This is what he wants to be. And you can see how different it is. You can see that in an industry where everything was the same, there was no differentiation between what the vet clinics were doing. It is possible to break out of that status quo and offer basically what is like a GP of animal care. Now, I think particularly given this audience, I think it's interesting to just hear a little bit about his experiences with the investors, what he had to do to try to scale this up. And so I want to play this clip for you and talk a little bit about the implications of that.
We started to see that I need to do the original idea, which was more services than just the vaccine part of it, the preventive care part of it that we started with originally 1 day a week. Wanted to do the more limited service stuff like ear infections, skin problems and such. And you can't really do that on a once a week basis. So we really needed to have something open, at least 5 days. We went for 7 days a week. I did not want to risk so much financial assets. I also didn't have much as far as that. So I got a business partner who I thought would help us, get some investment. We got a limited investment, and we started up. Now, Blue Ocean strategy is not always intuitive for people, and especially the elimination factor part. So I got a lot from my business partner about why don't we do dentals? We could do dentals in the morning, or why don't we do surgery? And so there's a lot of sort of already protecting the model before we even started this next location. We wanted to do it separately. I put on a separate name because my first one was doing so well, and I just wanted to make sure we tried under a different name for first, different company, but it was always this pushback against the model. I always say, like, sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for me was when my partner, with good intentions, came up with the idea of selling scented candles, and it was just one more kind of the idea, the Red Ocean style of, we could sell this and we could add that, and it doesn't necessarily make any sense. I was fortunate enough to buy my partner out, and then I merged the clinics. By then I had a third one that was once a week, and this second one was doing really well that I did with my partner, and we were open 7 days a week. We merged the three under the Pet World Clinic name, and then started opening up the others for more days. So this is now, we had opened the one with my partner in 2013, 2015, I bought him out, and then we continued to open more days a week in the original ones, getting them up to 6 days a week. And 2019, I'm ready to franchise. We felt we had a scalable model.
Okay, so we hear from him that there's a lot of trial and error going on here, right? There's a lot of trial and error. He's trying different things. He's consolidating. He's trying also to protect his model. He talks about protecting the model. And I think here, what becomes important is it's not enough, of course, just to have a great value proposition. That's not enough. You have to have a great value proposition, but you also have to have a great profit proposition. And these were the discussions he was having with the investors. So we can use the same tool that we were using for the value proposition, which was value being provided to the customers. We can use the same tool here to understand how is it that he's going to make this work and make money? Where is he not going to spend money anymore that he's going to invest elsewhere in order to be able to make money. So he applies the same tool, and this is what he gets. He says, this is where things are happening today. I have a certain price for my services in my vet clinic. I do a lot of upselling, and there's a lot of pressure to do upselling. We heard him talk about that in the first clip. There are revenues being generated from that. There are also a lot of marketing expenses, and he's doing a lot of marketing. Because he's doing so many different things, when he has the radiology and the anesthesia and the euthanasia, there is a lot of equipment, a lot of supplies being used, and his clinic has to be a certain size. And the number of the hours that the vets work is quite high. He has a fair amount of admin because, of course, he does have the phoning and all of that going on, the taking of appointments, etc., assistance, and not so much is being spent on the general or more preventative area. And as a result, because the vets are doing such high hours, the vet pay per hour is actually pretty low. And when he starts to think about his new value proposition and how that needs to impact on where he's going to spend his money and where his revenues are going to come from, it starts to look more like something like this. So slightly lower price, as we already said, no more upselling. He's not going to get any more revenues from that. Word of mouth marketing, not going to spend any money on that. Because of the nature of the offering, that he eliminated so many things, lower costs on this, lower clinic size, which of course interested the investors because he actually then managed to get higher revenue per square foot for his clinics. The number of hours that the vet works actually turns out to be lower because they're more predictable working hours. He's lowered his admin head count thanks to no telephoning, less assistance required. The vet pay per hour actually goes up. He can spend more time on preventative. And essentially, he's creating this GP of animal care and a franchise model for the first time in the vet clinic business. So he's using the same tool, trying to show and align the revenue and the costs with the value proposition that he's creating. So that's what he did. So essentially what's happening here, if we think about it, is this eliminate, reduce, raise, create mindset. So these 4 actions, eliminate, reduce, raise, create, is causing us to do 2 things at the same time that we would usually never do. The 2 things we're doing is we're trying to create more value, for the buyer, for the customer. And the way that we usually do that is we say, oh, we could do all these other great things. We're going to create all this extra value for the buyers, but we forget to look at what we're no longer going to do. And if we don't look at what we're no longer going to do, or what we're going to do less of, our costs are going to skyrocket. So what happens in the blue ocean world is by doing these 4 things simultaneously, you're actually doing 2 things at once and actually hitting that sweet spot, which is what we call the value innovation sweet spot. So we're no longer making this trade-off between creating more value and accepting that that's going to cost more. We're creating more value while simultaneously stripping out cost. That's why blue ocean thinking is quite different from the more traditional approaches. Can we say that it's a success? I would say, now for the last couple of years, he's really gone into the franchising, has a ton of interest. As you can see here, 100-something franchises now are being developed. This was some data that he provided from last year from 6 of his clinics. This is the original one, which now has been around since 2013, 14, something like that. But even some of the newer ones are starting to hit some interesting numbers. If you compare, for example, with a Subway franchise, he only takes a 7% franchise royalty, a 2% marketing royalty compared to, I think it's 12.5% for Subway and maybe 8% marketing royalty for a Subway. Yet, the profit that the investors have is approximate. Well, it comes to, on average, it's been more than double what the profits would be from a Subway. Average Subway, I think, grosses about $400,000 per year. Very simple step to get started. He's really focused on this new way of trying to franchise in an industry which, at that time, at least in the United States, really didn't exist. So I'd say he's out there, he's doing some really different things. And if I have to summarize into 3 points, what we can learn from this, it would be, having to visualize where you are and put it down on pen and paper is a real challenge. But it's really important to do that, because if you say, I know I need to do some different things, I feel stuck, and I know I need to do some different things, that's going to be the starting point for change. So it's a step not to skip. Try to draw it out. Try to draw out a strategy canvas. When you get back to your office or your home office or wherever, try to draw out what your strategy canvas looks like. So try to find those 10 or 12 things that you do that as a package describes what you do. Be honest with yourself in terms of how well you do those things, and then map out your best competitor. How similar or different are you? And is that a call to a call to action? So this is your starting point for change. Second thing I would say is, when we go out and we talk to people, what do you think we should do? What do you want? You're the customer, tell me what you want. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they want. It's the famous question that Henry Ford was asked about his Model T when the people came and said, what are you going to do? Well, he said, I'm not going to ask people what they want, because if I ask them what they want, they're going to tell me they want a faster horse. We've all heard this. People don't know what they want, but what they can do is complain and tell you what's wrong. Tell you what's wrong with their experience. And if you're really listening, and you can pick up on some pain points that nobody else really has picked up on, and then you can eliminate, reduce, raise, and create to get rid of those pain points, you're creating value. You are creating unprecedented value right there for that customer. And I say, don't talk to all your favorite customers. Go to marginal customers, people who are not very loyal to you. Talk to people who are not customers. So the last thing they want to do is have to go to the clinic with their dog. It's the last thing they want to do. They're not going to do it. Find out why. You're looking for pain points. You're not looking for a pat on the back. So try to talk to these people and really try to use your deepest listening skills and try to uncover what's going on. And lastly, I would say, we hear about this minus mindset. Sometimes we hear minus mindset. Blue Ocean is definitely pushing this. It's the idea that if you are going to add something, just make sure you're also thinking about what you're no longer going to do. That you're not just adding, that you know that might add some value for someone. Make sure that you're doing all 4 things. Eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. If you're not doing all 4 things, you might be setting an interesting strategy. If you're only adding and creating, you're doing premium strategy. If you want to try and control costs at the same time and not incur the costs of a premium strategy, well, then you might want to do all 4 things: eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. So just rest assured, there are some other things that can help you. I've talked mainly about the strategy canvas. I've talked about pain points. I've talked about the 4 actions and the 2B strategy canvas. So there are some other things that help you. It might be worth reading the book if you are interested in this approach. So there are some other things to talk about. But my final message to you would be, do you recognize who these people are? Anybody here play tennis? Anybody watch tennis, right? So we recognize who these people are. What makes them so great, and it breaks my heart, I can't really, as a Swiss citizen, breaks my heart I can't have Roger Federer on here anymore. He used to be front and center here, but these are winners. These are champions here. What makes them a champion? You can say, yeah, they have talent, but it's practice, 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 right? They become so good and they practice so much that what they're doing becomes an automatic movement. And the mindset that we need to click into in order to be able to challenge the status quo and to find the pain points is something that takes practice. So the first time you try to do Blue Ocean, like any new thing really, but the first time you do it, it might be sort of difficult. You'll be out of your comfort zone. But the more you do it, the more, you'll be able to click into this and have that sort of muscle memory that these guys have and what makes them great. So that would be my final message to you is don't just, give up, because it can be hard. It's counterintuitive for a lot of us. Just practice, practice, practice. And I want to leave that with my final message. I don't know if we have 5 minutes for questions or not, but thank you for your attention. I hope this story sort of inspires you to think just that there are some ways out there that you can use some tools and frameworks to really think differently about how to grow. And I think anybody in this room would be able to apply this successfully. So I wish you much luck if you decide to do so.
I told you so. I knew that it was going to be a fantastic session, and it's so applicable to all of us, although it's just the vet clinic that she's talking about, but I think it applies to all of us. We do it at Purina all the time, thinking about your business canvas and so on. But let's take 1 or 2 questions. Come on. Yes.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I thought it was really interesting. I'm really interested in the model and maybe where it came from and where it might go. Obviously, eliminate, reduce, raise, and was it create? Do you see like a future direction or an evolution of that model at all? And or was there a story behind it, where that came from? I'd love to know about the story. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. So the thinking itself. Thank you for the question. The thinking itself was developed by 2 INSEAD professors, Chan Kim and Renee Mobourne. Chan Kim happened to be my strategy professor when I got my MBA at INSEAD, actually, and this was before the book was published. He was doing all this research because he was trying to understand what is it that makes someone successful, and is there a pattern to that? And he and his academic partner, Renee Mobourne, realized, after 15 years of research looking into companies, that there were some patterns that you could recognize, and it includes failures too. I mean, they really, they didn't just look at success stories. They also looked at failures to try to understand what works, what doesn't work. And so they came up with this, it's called Blue Ocean Strategy. In the academic world, it's called value innovation. They wanted a catchier name. Branding is important, as we know. So Blue Ocean Strategy, the idea was that that more and more we are swimming in shark-infested waters. That those are the red oceans of today. That there's bloody competition out there, and that we're swimming in this, and industries are getting more and more competitive. And when there's so much choice, consumers, buyers, anybody is lost of what to do. So it's not really serving anybody very well. The metaphor of the blue ocean is this idea that there are new species being discovered every week, every month, every year in the ocean, that they're out there somewhere in this blue ocean. We just don't know how to go and find them. And so Blue Ocean Strategy, the idea is that we can systematize, go out there and systematically look for these blue oceans where there are no competitors. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create new markets. Most of the time, you're often you're pulling people in that aren't even customers at all. So this notion of the non-customer that I was talking about when you're talking about trying to understand pain points, you want to try and understand who is not a customer, because if you can create something that will pull them in, you're essentially creating a brand new market. And in terms of the evolution of the thinking from 2006, I think, is when the first book came out, now through to May of this year, the latest book came out by Chan and Renee. It's moved very much from not only thinking about how blue ocean thinking is different from typical traditional strategy and sort of the Michael Porter frameworks that if people have studied strategy at all, that's the holy grail was competitive thinking. Michael Porter from Harvard University, Blue Ocean Strategy was directly hitting that on the head to say no, that's not the only way to grow. You can do that very successfully. There are a lot of companies that do that very successfully. I would say Microsoft, for example, great example of a red ocean company, does really well doing that. But if you want to try and grow differently and have some frameworks to think about it differently, you can use Blue Ocean. And what's happened now is it's not enough just to differentiate between red ocean thinking, competitive strategy, and value innovation. Now the question is, do I need to disrupt? Disruption is everywhere. Disruption by definition means somebody is being displaced. The incumbent is disappearing, and the new entrant, which is quite often, technically, a technical entrant coming in, taking over, means that the incumbent will die. And what Blue Ocean strategy now is realizing is that a lot of the application of Blue Ocean has taken place in a way that there is no disruption. It doesn't have to be destructive. So disruption is destructive. Blue Ocean talks about non-destructive creation. And that's sort of the buzzword right now in the field of strategy, is that we don't have to kill or disrupt or somebody disappears in order to create new business. We can actually create good things. We can create new jobs, not only lose them. So it's quite an interesting field. If you're into strategy, it really has evolved in that way. And I think it's quite hopeful because in this world, being able to create jobs and not only destroying them is, to me anyway, is much more motivating than just trying to figure out who you're going to disrupt. So that's really a little bit more in the background of the thinking and the ton of research that goes into it at INSEAD.